In tiny corners of every part of the world, there live the misfit housemakers, the rebel builders.
Be quiet.
You're not quiet.
They're the ones who don't accept the status quo and think they can improve how we live by adapting the rules.
What is this?
So basically, we were tired of paying rent in the Mission, so for less than our rent on an old 2-bedroom, we rented this whole half acre and kind of lightly tested the landlord ahead of time. We're like, we're just going to build small houses here and you're going to get an automatic payment of rent every month and don't worry about it. On the container that Heather and I live in, we've got a kilowatt of solar on the roof, and then this weird microwave dish is internet. It's pretty post-apocalyptic looking. Instead of everything being a custom build where you have to become a master carpenter before you can have something you can live in, this is something where you can get a box and live in it.
So this porch area are the doors of the container, and the whole porch is bolted on with 6 bolts. So we can, if we want to move the container, we just unbolt the porch. It slides right into this part of the container, and then you can shut the doors. And then we can pick it up with a crane and put it on a semi and drive it anywhere we want.
What makes a good home? We've tried to regulate the idea for thousands of years. Even the Bible had building codes.
It's totally illegal to have a house this small, but you have such permission to experiment. Bathroom's a work in progress.
We have an on-demand water heater. When you have to go to the bathroom, you just use this. And then when you're done, we just open up this bucket and pour the char, and that keeps it all smell-free and composting.
It's undeniable that building codes have saved lives.
What do you want?
But what if at this information age, we're innovating too fast for the rules?
All of our transportation infrastructure is optimized to move these things around the world, let alone the country. I think the real barrier is people, 1, being worried about what they're going to do for their bathroom, and 2, being worried with some legitimacy. Like, zoning can be a huge pain in the ass, and part of this is us not having dealt with that. Another part of it is us just being risk-seeking and making a bet that enough people are sufficiently pissed off about how unaffordable it is to live in such a great city, that the rules we're breaking, we should have a good reason why we're breaking them, and a feasible path to how we could change them, and then, kind of go from there. So I want to build a compelling reason for why people should change laws. It's not a system where everyone thinks that zoning rules are just totally irrational and that homes are only affordable for the richest 1% is not sustainable. And yes, we should complain about it. Yes, we should try to change that in other ways, but those are a lot less enjoyable to me and a lot less fruitful than just building alternatives.
Rule-bending builders are everywhere, but there are some places where this breed is allowed to flourish. There's still a frontier for renegade builders. A place of few laws and shelters adapted to the land. This promised land is the American Southwest. We were in search of lean architecture, so we had made frugality the dogma of our personal journey. No camper van this year.
We're traveling this small car, and we are a family of 5. So that means food, shelter, and clothes, and all necessities. So that means we have to be really lean.
Should I go get you some milk?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I'm getting it.
With our borrowed classic tent and mobile fridge, we were trying to keep things simple and adaptable to spontaneous campings.
Feels like a movie to me.
Does, doesn't it?
It's just a rough land, you know. It's Arizona, guys. Why you wanna welcome people in this heat? It's hot.
It's too hot.
Mama,
Yeah?
touch it.
Why?
Please touch it. Don't take a video.
Okay, all right.
Grapes.
They're frozen so hard.
Anything in the freezer is gonna be fizzy.
They are fizzy.
It's kind of fizzy. You know why? Because actually, the ice we're using, the dry ice we're using inside of the cooler is CO2, and fizzy water is made out of CO2, so the water condenses inside of the fruit. That's why fizzy is fizzy food. That's what's happening. So this is science class. Let me see. It's fishy.
The sky is fizzy.
The sky is awake.
Like so I'm awake.
There's a town up there, either a town or a colony in Mars. I mean,
We were in search of an agile type of urbanism that flourishes in places often too isolated to regulate how we build our shelters.
una tipi, guys, a tipi. A yurt, an airstream. Those are tiny houses. Oh, mini lots for sale, starting at $2,000. Look at the houses. Oh,
Oh, look at that. Just abandoned.
Is it abandoned? It isn't abandoned.
It means that nobody lives there anymore.
Where?
Right on the side. Can you tell? There's nobody in them. They're falling apart.
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's difficult to set up a town. So imagine they just came here because of the gold, and there was nothing. They tried to create a town, but creating a town out of nothing in a desert is very, very, very tough. You know, there's no density, no streets.
It's funny.
And we are just 1 minute out of town, you have desert.
Si hace caso siempre la vida. Mira. Dependerá y todo ganado. Y si no quieres ir la cuesta arriba, comer la cuesta abajo. Corre, corre, caballito. Corre por la carretera. No detengas tu carrera. Que la Carabeles van sonando, ding dong, y a su paso van marcando, ding dong, arrarre casi rabito, ding dong, qué bonito caballito.
So over 1,000 miles already. So from San Francisco, now Arizona, passing through the redstone.
It's raining.
It's the rain, Arizona rain.
We were headed for an experimental town an hour outside of Phoenix, Arizona.
Should be right. There it is over there.
I want Mama. Those are only 3 houses.
Straight, and then
How can you say that?
keep going down the dirt road. Yep, there's the sign up. It's called an urban laboratory
Why is it called that?
because they're trying to study ideas for how you could make communities.
Hi guys.
I've been fascinated by this place for a long time. Arco Santi was dreamt up by a former apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright, who believed that going back to the land didn't mean giving up on city living.
I came from an Italian city, and when I got here, I was surprised by this emphasis on abandoning the city. So there's a long tradition in Europe and in other continents about the development from the tribal into the metropolitan, and it's called civilization. So civilizing means urbanizing.
Paolo Soleri bought 800 acres of unincorporated land here in the late 60s, but would limit building to just a few of those acres. The idea was to create a vertical town with a footprint so small the surrounding nature remained untouched and easily accessible to all. Arco Santi predates the more modern walkable city concept of new urbanism, and it goes much further.
Concepts like new urbanism, in my opinion, there's something new about it. They're thinking about going back to like the old town, Main Street style of American development, where you have this commercial development on a main axis and you kind of build your city around that. But yeah, so yeah, this is like the next step after new urbanism or something. This would be something like after cars.
Está? Go by the front door. Here we're more part of an urban experiment. We don't have to drive everywhere, and so there's not that stress of getting in the car and, you know, try to go somewhere. Aha! There he is.
I'm doing
What are
this.
you doing?
I have to do this.
You have to do that?
I never-
You're working hard? Yeah? So
When I first met Nadia and David 15 years ago,
What are you eating, that peanut butter?
their son was the first child to be raised at Arco Santi.
It's almost a piece of ice.
They believed there was something healthy in what could happen because of the density here.
That's probably the biggest problem with cities is that they spread out and destroy all the animals and natural environment. And that's one of the things that the architecture here is addressing directly. You're densifying the space and conserving the land around to remain a natural environment. Oh. What's happening here?
Papa, my toe started bleeding. I put 2 band-aids on.
When you densify spaces, you have more multi-use of the spaces. Having a workplace right below this space, and
I have the binding here.
the way the spaces are dealt with in terms of a mixture of public and private spaces. Most of the spaces that you walk to around here have entertainment spaces, workspaces, and living spaces all mixed in.
This is where we have concerts or performances of different kinds. All these lower level doors you see here are intended to be like storefronts. So this would be like a commercial space on the ground floor And then above you have multi-person apartments. And at the very top you have single apartments. We are right here on this kind of continuum space in such a small, compact area. What Paulo called the urban effect is kind of what he sees as the driving force behind cities.
By densifying the spaces, all the spaces become more interesting to people. They're used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And it only happens in the city. You know, and the size of, Paulo calls it the critical mass, which is 5,000 to 10,000 people. That's when the urban effect happens.
Curves like that.
Yeah. We all know when we go to a nice designed city, you know, like New York or San Francisco, or if I take Montreal as an example, those are all cities where they have enough of a density and a center where it's interesting and there's a lot going on, and that urban effect is really important.
Probably by today or tomorrow, we should have most of the steel work finished.
The city is like an ecosystem. The more complex things get, the smaller they get. Look at the human brain. It starts as a couple cells, but then it gets turned into this completely complex and crazy convoluted matrix of things. What we're trying to show here is that the same thing can happen with cities. As it grows complex, it has to be highly interlinked and three-dimensional to like be most efficient.
The American dream is a non-lean alternative at this point. I've been talking about what I call a lean alternative.
Do you feel like people need to give up more in order to?
Well, I don't call it giving up. I tend to call it freeing up. Because the virtue of leanness eventually is worthiness, streamlining what life might be.
Paolo Soleri died 2 years ago. Arco Santi has never come close to hosting the 5,000 people he'd hoped would live here. But he always insisted this was simply an urban laboratory, an experiment for others to copy and improve upon.
Crazy, it's a forest of cacti. So many.
70 miles south of Arco Santi, Soleri's former mentor set up camp in the 1930s to study the desert rather than importing his own ideas about what an Arizona home should look like.
Wow, what's that?
Big stuff.
One of the nicest ideas of Frank Lloyd Wright was that he didn't take any model for granted. So he, for instance, would try to know a place, an environment, and then try to build a structure that was not related to time or style.
They're very good. So young. What? In 600 feet, turn right. That's something at home. What home?
To create an architecture tailored to Arizona, Frank Lloyd Wright camped for 4 years here before he began to build his winter home and school. Wright's students would repeat the lessons of their teacher. Back in the late 30s, they slept in shepherd's tents. Today, the materials are newer, but they all develop a relationship with the surrounding desert.
As you can see, they're very rustic. Many of them don't have walls. This one doesn't really have a roof because this roof is not waterproof by any stretch. So they stay in these shelters, college students, right? And so, for example, the students, when they arrive, they are given a shelter. They explore a little bit. Seniority, they get to choose, with pecking order. And they find a shelter, and they have to live there from October to May. In the elements, with no plumbing, with no electricity, very little light in this desert. We're out in 500 acres in North Scottsdale. And why do that? I mean, part of the idea is they'll learn about what's needed, like what kind of shelter is actually necessary to sustain life. The student that built this was experimenting several ways, and one of the ways was with heating, because the desert gets quite cold at night. And so the idea was to build a fire here, a robust fire, have it heat this platform, and then enjoy the residual heat throughout the evening. And the experiment was moderately successful. I mean, supposedly there was some heat, but it quickly dissipated, and that was that. And what's most curious to me is this: when I arrived here a year ago, I met this delightful woman. She had been a bachelor student, and she was finishing up her master's. She chose this shelter out of all the shelters that she could have had, because she had the most seniority. So she had the pick of the litter. She could have done whatever she wanted. And she chose this shelter, and as I was mentioning earlier, this would be the sleeping platform. And so she would just put her sleeping bag right here, and when it rained, since the rain would go right through this tarp, she would put a plastic tarp over her to protect herself. And that was her choice, and she really loved it. And you know what? This is actually my favorite shelter too, because it really asks you to think about what you really need to survive. The students find out, and they also find out that architecture can get in the way of experiencing your environment. And so you don't want to put up walls, or you want to put up columns that block your experience. I love this one. It feels, to me, just like the desert that we were walking through. This is under construction.
So all students build a shelter or help
Yeah.
out with one, or?
Okay, right. So the students can choose to live in one like this that was built a long time ago by another student. And then they can choose to work on it, help with remodeling and rehabilitating. And that's often how they cut their teeth and then decide to build their own shelter. I love this one. It's when it was done, it was just nothing but benches in a U. You can imagine it's just a big conversation pit, right? Just a huge conversation pit, and it all opens up. All these panels open up.
So this kind of circles back to what you were saying about what makes a shelter.
What's necessary for sustaining life. I mean, of course, they have access to a kitchen and a studio to work. But when you looked at the original camp, it was just white tents in the desert, and that's what Frank Lloyd Wright was working with. So the kitchen was a tent, the studio was a tent, his quarters were tents. And then slowly they built up more substantial things. And then they used each attempt to experiment with methods and materials. And from there, they are using this as a canvas.
Frank Lloyd Wright believed in learning by doing. It had been his path. He'd become our country's most famous architect without earning even a college degree. He believed formal education is based on the past, and only inferior minds learn by comparison. I've learned about architecture, he said, by incessant experiment and experience in the study of nature.
Isn't it amazing how these rocks just scatter across the floor? It's really gorgeous.
Study the patterns in nature, no?
Exactly. As Frank Lloyd Wright often said, just study it. Study how it does what it does. How does it create its structures, its forms, mimic them? They work. Obviously, they're successful and they evolved. So how can we improve? We just need to, in some ways, learn from it.
Just as nature continues to evolve, so should our homes. Wright continued to tinker with Taliesin West for decades. But today, we've somehow regulated ourselves into a more rigid idea of house, regardless of the environment.
The students that have lived there say there's scorpions in there. And their theory is the scorpions get in and can't find their way out, which is why a lot of students prefer the ones without walls. See? Our walls can trap things in as opposed to keeping things out, is what they've discovered.
Wright believed a home should be part of the world it sat in. There should be a continuum between the land and its inhabitants. Architecture is a completion of nature, protecting us just enough, but not too much, from the world outside.
So the hanging tent, it's completely suspended by a cable. You have to take a ladder to get up to it. And then you step off the platform into the tent, and it's just one big bed, basically. So we have a student, he's a master's student here from India, and he's been staying in there. And when I asked him how his time is going here, are you enjoying yourself? Are you having a good time in America? He loves that shelter. His eyes just light up, and he says that what's most amazing to him is he can lay in bed and look at the stars.
Let's set up a good tarp tonight, since we know it's more than possible that it will rain. This is a tarp, this wonderful roof that is going to shelter us tonight, and it's going to
From all the rain.
protect us from the rain that is going to fall. It's not worse than a motel room. We just pick the view, pick the place. Took how much? 10 minutes? So here are the mattresses. What we did is to invest in self-inflating mattresses. All you have to do with these guys is just open the valves and they just do it.
You roll them out?
No, they do it by themselves.
They roll. Oh.
They roll by themselves.
Oh, great.
These days it takes a YouTube video to find out how things work.
And then what do we have? 2 sleeping bags for 5 people?
Yeah. But we open them up and they just become a bottom of a queen size bed.
That's a 2-person tent?
This is could be considered 2-person. In my opinion, it could be a 4-person.
But I think it's a 2-person.
We were thinking that since we're 5, we are going to sleep horizontally.
A little longer. No, an hour. What's happening, Mama?
You see the salt in there? Just random salt patch in the desert.
Quiet. Is that a train?
It's a train, yeah.
Biggest train I've probably ever seen in my life. It's not finishing.
The Continental Divide is right here. Texas. Texas.
Texas is the only U.S. state that was once its own nation.
Funny that
Gateway to Juarez, Mexico.
yeah, that's Ciudad Juarez.
That can't be Mexico. There's no border. Isn't the border right there? Maybe that
the
is the
houses.
border. Are we right on the border?
Yes.
You guys, that's Mexico over there.
Texas is so big that for most of its history, no one has bothered to monitor the borders.
And so then, this is El Paso.
Texas is a place that feels unbounded. And people still come here to live by their own rules.
It's not a real store.
Can you go inside of the store?
It's not a real store. It's just an art exhibit. Stardust Motel.
Mommy.
It has this touch of, place lost in time. It's, attractive frontier type of living, Western living in a sense. You're kidding me, that guy's from America.
City of Marfa. There's the town hall.
Typography. Very cool typography.
Marfa, Texas is a libertarian experiment in minimalism. There's no one regulating a frugal style, yet one has emerged here. The town began as a railroad water stop in 1880.
This is right.
But it was reborn less than a decade later when artist Donald Judd moved here from New York City and bought up large parts of the town. Today, the place is an international art world destination.
Look at this one.
Oh yeah. You like that corrugated steel, huh?
Yeah, people are experimenting. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's gonna be the cheapest thing, but it looks nice.
But despite all the new money, this place has remained faithful to Judd's minimalism. Donald Judd believed that with art and architecture, empty space is fundamental to the whole. Here, everything is framed by the big Texas sky. And there's an intensity that comes with being forced to see more of less.
It's very idealistic, isn't it? It's very on the open road, open land, open air, open sky. Everything you don't get everywhere else.
Judd died over 20 years ago, but his creed that nothing should ever be bigger than necessary is still the town's unwritten code.
This is Texas. We almost crossed into Mexico back there.
West Texas is what we have left of a frontier.
You guys, that's Mexico over there. That river separates the two. That doesn't seem like a very big border, though.
It has a river for a border and a population so sparse that until recently, no one bothered to check who was crossing it.
Teepees. I see 3 teepees.
Somebody can get in.
Picnic area. You can have picnicking in there.
You can?
It's a rest stop.
This was mostly Comanche and Apache land until after the Civil War. And it was only in the 20th century, with oil and mining discoveries, did the area enter the U.S. economy. We heard about a ghost town 100 miles south of Marfa, with new signs of settlement. We were headed there to camp for the night.
Jimena, what is that? What is Papa doing?
It's called tenda campana. But it's not a teepee. The teepee has 1 stick and the tenda campana has 2 sticks.
Oops. We have a problem here.
Is this more difficult than a modern tent?
This is more old school. New tents are different. Their structure is different. They use flexible metal.
Good thing we have a tarp cover. It's starting to rain, guys. We're going to be sleeping in the rain tonight. Was you comfy with all 5 of us in there, Ness?
We'd slept in what was supposedly a campground within the ghost town. But at the moment, it was as abandoned as the rest of town.
Camping hotel.
Do you know what Las Ruinas means? The ruins.
What are ruins?
Ruins are, like here, the ruins are the old homes that were crumbling apart from the old mining town. So that's a ruin. That was an old house.
Mama,
They weren't very big, were they?
Mom, why were they so small?
Because people didn't build as big. It was probably just something practical and easy for what they needed.
They want to spend a lot of time building. They were looking for whatever they were mining. Yeah, Nikki. At the beginning of the last century, Terlingua, Texas was a mining town.
Look, that one's my favorite. There's a door.
Most of the population here had traveled north from Mexico and built their homes from adobe bricks. Careful, but don't go inside if there's a roof that could fall on you, okay?
There's a door here too.
Oh, there's a door here, but let's just see if there's a roof. Oh, there is a roof.
There's 2 rooms, and one of the rooms doesn't have a roof.
Oh. The roof is only thatched. Anyway, it's not anything big, I guess.
What's this?
This place flourished with the global demand for mercury during 2 world wars.
Ah!
But when peace arrived in the 1940s, the mines closed down and the workers left their homes behind.
It's made out of clay.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this right here.
So yeah, that's like what they used to use for roofing, I guess.
I like this house. Ooh! I'm closing the window up so nobody will see me.
Isn't that funny?
This is such a fun house.
Today, there are new settlers here, creating their own rules for how things should be rebuilt.
In '96, the owner said I could build a place in the ghost town. So we have this coffee shop, which is also the lobby for our hotel.
Could you build what you wanted? Is there even a town council here? Or how does it
Well,
work?
no, it's a sole owner.
Not one owner of the entire town.
One owner for the whole town. And there are a lot of towns here in Texas that are privately owned.
Do you have any idea what it cost?
You know, I think $100,000 was floating around, but I don't know. This is my driveway, which had a bit of rain last night. These are what remained of some of the ruins, and they're now starting to be fixed up to some extent. This house here is being built by a guy who studies internal bacteria. So he's in Africa right now, and he's fixing this up.
So basically, you can do. I mean, there's no codes and zoning and all that.
No, no permits or anything like that. It's pretty much if the owner likes what the setup was.
Do you mind that there's not a lot of infrastructure? You know, if you think about a typical town, it would be paved and you would have, you know.
Yeah, but I grew up as an adult out here.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. Huh. We have a high school, and a school has 97 students total. And it's, you know, it takes a community thing. Everybody gets involved. The teachers are sometimes parents too. This happens to be the old Model A that was the school bus.
That was a school bus. When?
Way back in like the 1930s.
So that's your garage.
That's my garage. I wash my dishes outdoors. I was given a dishwasher because I do throw big parties. I know, nothing's made up.
So did you build this?
I did. So when I came here, we started in this room, which was actually an adobe room, an adobe house.
So this was an old house?
So you have to duck.
Okay.
Yes. This is the original doorway here. And I found a box behind some rocks there and a box behind here. And that showed us what the parameters of the room were. Obviously, we raised the ceiling a lot. Let's go this way.
So as far as what was here, is this all new?
There was just one room, but it wasn't even a room. It was a doorway and a box sitting on some rocks. And I started building in '96 and real quickly had a home. This is my bathroom and tub and fireplace for when it's cold. It's just a special room. We built it one summer just from pieces that we found. And then in the winter, I'm so high class, I stuff this all with newspaper. And then that makes it warm in here.
And so as far as like, did you have to get the owner to okay everything you built? And
Well, since I was one of the first to do it, not so much, but I made my own rules. It couldn't be a great big house. You had to try to use indigenous materials whenever you can.
so there's no bigger authorities like the county that comes in, or
I think they're starting to say no new outhouses. You know,
Okay.
stuff like that. I don't know if that's really exactly how it's worded,
Yeah.
but no new outhouses is the way.
Why do you know?
I think they're starting to, you know, we're having more people, so you do have to have more rules. County's made some, but. There's a nice outhouse with a toilet and a sink in it, but it is an outhouse. We use lime and put a scoop of lime in afterwards.
Well, you can see the lime on the sides.
And periodically we have a guy come clean it out like every 15 years.
There's no smell at all.
I'm starting to put in flush toilets. I sunk the septic system for the town, which was like an 18-wheeler, and now we're all starting to attach to it. So, you know, we're having more people, so we now have a more of a knowledge, a known entity from writers and photographers.
And what does that do? Does that change? I mean, I guess that's going to mean.
Well, you know what? We're all not Yahooing anymore.
Terlingua may be civilizing, but the county is still full of yahoos. There are only 1.4 people per square mile in Brewster County. Stick left here, left here, left here. This is promised land for renegade home builders. Here, the population is so small, neighbors don't put neighbors at risk with subpar building. So it's up to the individual to determine their level of exposure. So you like
Don't touch
This is the field lab.
This guy's alive.
No, they can't be. No. Oh, they are alive. Oh my god.
Mira.
Look at that.
The main reason I came to this area is because no building restrictions whatsoever. And that's really hard to find in this country. You can do whatever you want. I could live in this doghouse if I wanted to, and that would be perfectly fine.
Wow.
So this is my outdoor shower. It had a door on it, but it blew off in the last storm, which out here it doesn't really matter if you have a door or not. I was a set builder in New York City for a number of years, and I used those skills to build the basic box of my house in a week and put it together and moved in.
It's cool in here.
So you're in the foyer and the kitchen right now. Then we have a long hallway, and there's a bedroom on the right and an office, living room, dining room on the left. Now I left my house in upstate New York when I moved out here. That house was 2,800 square feet. So I've gone from 2,800 to 128. I cook on here. There's a propane tank under the counter, and it's just a regular burner. Everything's so simple here. It's just like, I was busting my ass 7 days a week just to pay all the bills for all the stuff I had. And now it's pared down to one room. I've got a huge yard, with all this land. I can't see another house from my property, which is another big plus. The Biko washer, my bike-powered washing machine. Oh yeah, it's agitating.
John Wells has been living out here for 8 years, longer than most big city transplants.
Oh, there goes the belt.
He calls his homestead the Field Lab, and he's turned his life into a big experiment.
This building, which was part of my grand scheme when I came out here, was to create this giant greenhouse courtyard thing with shipping containers. This one was going to be my house.
Wells seems to be searching desperately for limits in a land without rules.
The only rule that I know of out here is if you have a permanent residence on 10 acres or less, you have to have a county-approved septic or a county-approved composting toilet. I have a composting toilet bucket. There's just a box here that's got a bucket in it with sawdust in it, and everything goes into that. Yeah, you know, if you have a big city and everyone's just going out in their front yard and pooping, there could be a problem eventually. I don't know if the population's ever going to really grow out here because, you know, drilling a well is a crapshoot out here. I do all rainwater catchment here. There's no electricity on most of the ranch. People kind of like to have a place to plug in and then a place to turn on a faucet and have endless running water, but that just doesn't happen out here. This is my swamp cooler. There's a little bilge pump in here. I fill this with water, and the bilge pump is hooked up to a timer, so every couple of minutes it turns on and pumps water up into this little reservoir here, which drips it through this evaporative pad here. This gets soaked with water, and as the air is getting pulled through it, the air evaporates some of that water as it's passing over it, and that's where you get the cooling effect, where it cools down.
I had the feeling a big part of what Wells was doing out here was an act of rebellion.
You know, I've got all the house projects in line now. You know, I got an Airstream to redo. I've got shipping container houses to do. I've got a big trailer to do a mobile house on maybe someday.
It was as if, given the freedom to experiment, he couldn't resist collecting tiny structures that were illegal in most of the country.
My Airstream here was kind of an impulse buy a couple of years ago. I've got a bed in here. I throw a bunch of extra clothes in here.
So it's your guest bedroom?
Kind of, yeah. I could never do something like this in upstate New York where I lived because they had all sorts of building restrictions. When it comes right down to it, you have to have rules about how you can build a house in a populated area because, well, they do it for safety's sake, a lot of the building code and stuff, but it's inevitable when you get a whole bunch of people together that some of them are going to want to make the rules and everybody else is going to have to live by them. So, and there's not a whole lot of places like this anymore where you can just go and do what you want. It's a nasty town, that Austin. Be careful when you get there.
Why is it nasty?
Because there's a lot of people.
Ah, yeah. You've left that behind.
Bye.
Bye.
I see a bird, and I see two trees sitting on a balcony, cottage trees. A dog with sunglasses on. There's a dog with sunglasses on up there. A dolphin. And that's a witch that's laughing.
I got the word around out of gas. Sounds deserted place in Texas.
It's been a while without thing blinking. The blinking bar would mean at least 1 gallon. Our speed would equal 60 miles per gallon. We were 70 miles away when it started blinking. So we're gonna be close to that, you know. The road is very, very flat, so we are getting the best mileage possible. same time we're charging part of the electric battery, so hopefully we can use the electric battery if we run out of gas completely.
Now I see the house I went in today.
Perfect place to get out of gas since there's no cellular connection either, so we wouldn't be able to go. So we will wait with no shade for a car.
Oh yeah, I just see M&Ms. Now they look like pigs. Now there's pigs.
There's no cars either.
No cars now.
And there's one house. That's an awful long run.
If we happen to be stopped, we could even camp. I'll buy 20.
20 miles. Right now we're just under a marathon.
Oh, that's a good mindset. Maybe I just put on my shoes. Look at that. They're just waiting for us.
Whoa, bunch went right over us.
Oh, guys. We live nowhere in southern Texas.
That has to be the town. We can practically coast down that.
We are not stopping.
It's just because we're running out of gas. And you know what that means? If we run out of gas, we can't get there without running there. So we just want to keep coasting down the hill.
Now we're going downhill. We're using the last bit of gas. Getting over 100 miles a gallon.
We'll be there soon. Just, you can see the town. See the town right there?
Get gas first, okay?
So then we go to the store and we can do everything, okay?
Yep, we're pulling in, so we're gonna make it. Yeah, right next to it.
Ah, we're making it. Up, auto haul repair, no gas, no gas.
Wow.
No gas. It's nearly 500 miles from Terlingua to the big cities of Austin or San Antonio.
5 north. Austin.
We weren't actually going to either city, but to a homestead between the two.
No, maybe those are right. That's the other guys. Yeah, no, that's not ours. Wait.
Where one man was creating his idealized world of tiny homes built from salvaged materials.
Yeah, maybe that's the guy. Oh no, that's the one. That's the one. That's it right there.
He had offered us a place to stay for the night in one of his semi-legal structures.
Okay, you can pull right in.
Here?
Yeah, and it's electrified. Yeah. Did you like sleeping here, Ximena, last night? Is it comfy in this house?
It's comforting to wake up in a home that feels lived in. Everything here, the walls, the windows, has a past. Normally I would find the heaviness of these materials too much.
There.
But in such a small space, there wasn't enough of it to get in the way. Instead, it felt like the work had been done. It was a house that had become a home already, with all the flawed beauty of time past. The entire compound felt lost in time. It was a magical world of resurrected shelters, and running the show was a sort of Willy Wonka of tiny houses.
Hi, welcome to Temple Tatra.
The house is almost magical for me, and living in it has been absolutely magical for me. The house is actually comprised of probably 30 to 40 species of wood. I've used everything from mesquite, longleaf pine, loblolly pines, walnut, rosewoods. You can look on the growth lines, like for this piece, for example. Every dark line is a year growth. So there's 10 years, there's 50 years, there's about 60 years of growth in that 1 1/4 inch board. So that tree was growing that slow, maybe 150 feet tall. And we came in and slaughtered it. Just literally in 1830, we had 5,000 square miles of longleaf pine trees. These are the last of the masters of the earth in our part of the world, the hardest, strongest trees. Survive fires and everything else, just like the sequoia. Guess what? 50% landfills are building materials. 50% of landfills are building materials. That's actually pre-Civil War over there, all those beams right there out of tobacco barns out of Tennessee that I brought in years ago. I hate to throw things away. It's one of my big issues, obviously. Another experiment in how small can we go. This is 80 square feet and was designed as one of 2 houses we built out of the Ugly Duckling, a house we tore down in 1 day. I have enough materials in place to build 100 houses. There's about 6 different houses worth of windows in this house. All the windows in original glass. Imagine a piece of glass, 120 years old. That's much more fun than going to Home Depot and buying $5, $75 vinyl or plastic or aluminum windows and screwing them into a box of plywood. Much more fun.
So you just find people sell you their houses?
Oh, they don't sell them to me, they give them to me. They want them to be saved. That's their mothers and fathers' blood, sweat, and tears. That's the point I'm making, is people give you houses all over the country to do this with. You don't have to go buy them. Detroit, we threw away 20,000 houses last year. Cincinnati, we threw away 14,000 houses last year. All over the country, the industrialized cities are falling apart and crumbling, and we're throwing it away instead of transforming that into the treasures of the children in the future. I rated these. These are 95% pure salvage. This example right here is only 63 square feet. It was an experiment by taking 3 sections of the house, 3 walls, not dismantling them, but leaving all the tongue and groove on them. The one's a wall with, you can see an outlet in the floor because it was a wall, and one was another wall between 2 windows, another wall. So I put them together to see what can we do if we don't tear it apart, put it back together again. So when this is done, this actually folds down. This is all hinged. These are barn hinges, and when it gets to its side, it can actually be bolted in if you want, but it's all designed to fold down for transport. This is a prototype for a design where you'll be able to come up, tilt the whole house down on its side, transport it, tilt it back up when you get there, and then you're going to beat the codes on how wide and how tall before you have to have a permit. If we can escape permitting, I can drop houses off in the middle of nowhere and nobody actually will ever be knowing about it. And it just shows up in the air as a storage shed. So what I did in here was to go ahead and make this so that, as I tell everybody, let's just say I got a big date. You know, as single guys, it's hard to get a big date when you live in a tiny house, because what girl in these days and age that was brought up to marry a guy with a bunch of money so you buy him a great big house? Why on earth would you date a guy that lives in a tiny house? Well, when you come in, it's going to be all pretty, look like it's big, all right? So you want to give the girl a little dinner. So you go ahead and take the bench down. Go ahead and take your little table down. You get a little dinner out. You want to sit her over here nice and cozy so you can actually cook. Now, assuming that went well, and you just say you want to dance, you could lift this up and do a little dancing. Get a little sweaty? You can take a little shower. This is set up here where, like I said, you have your little bucket in here and a seat. So it'll be built in where you can actually have your little commode if you have a late night emergency, you can get to make it to the bathhouse. This one's more designed to be a satellite house. I could be, I can take my shower in here. And this actually have water. We have running water, city water out here. Because we actually got city utilities when they annexed 3 acres of me at the end of my 43 acres. Unfortunately, they won't let me build my houses on that annexed land because I don't build the code. So I can't have them even sit over there overnight and have people stay in them overnight because I didn't use double pane insulated glass, commercial, corporate required windows, and I didn't use new corporate stamped wood. Therefore, they're not meeting the quality. Now, they're much more energy efficient than I'm required to do, but then again, we don't build conventional, so they won't allow this. This doesn't classify as a kitchen. That won't classify as a bathroom. This is a chunk, 100 years of growth out of a chunk of a tree that was 500 years old. I can't even import it anymore. Here I use stuff that was newer. This is long when we had yellow pine back in the 40s and 50s. We stamped it. This is certified. I should be able to use this, but it's salvaged. Oh. Well, guess what? Uncle Sam created a business out of building code, National Building Code. We now force you to use these double pane insulated glass, built with vinyl, that will go bad every 12 years. By the time they pay back, they'll actually go bad. Now, I don't use them. In my world, people can come and learn how to take trash and turn it into their occupations, their homes for their family, their future, their security, and a way to get off the grid and so much even off the system where you don't need money to survive if you can build a home out of trash. So this actually is going to have, before we're done, probably another house sitting over there, house sitting over here. In Texas, it takes only 54 people to vote to become a town. That means people living here or people using this as their residence that they come back to and call home. We can actually incorporate and become our own town for the purpose of having our own police force, having our own building code, having our own school system, and set up our own rules and regulations about our businesses, our zoning.
It may take a bit more than just 54 people to start a town. But the point is, you can start your own town, something most of us wouldn't consider. But then, most of us consider the limits of convention before building our homes.
We'll go back to where the greenhouse is going to be.
Like the fictional Willy Wonka, Darby Kittle does more or less what he wants and figures out later how to make it all legal.
There's a 40-foot container right here, and that sits pretty much partially underneath my house. So we can collect water and be able to grow under, which is where, of course, we can control the weather. So just as in the past when the Lakota and the Hopi went underground for 200 years, people think, oh my God, it's not possible. Well, yeah, they did it. What happened is, and this goes down another 10 or 12 feet, this is water, 65 degrees with heavy bentonite clay in it. Kind of grody right now. It's just dirt floating on top. And we have frogs actually living down here now. But it's 65-degree water. Once we drop, there's a couple things we can drop in to desilt it. We could actually make it clear water. And we could actually have fish down here growing.
What there?
Where?
The bus.
Oh, it's an RV.
So how did you get it under there, under your house?
On a crane, same way I got my house on top of it. In an ideal world, every main house where you come to eat dinner is also where you open the trap door and you go down below. Because in Texas, this is not taxable as living square footage. This is just a hole in the ground. Now, if I happen to put a wooden walls and wood doors on that little section right there and turn it into living space, well, gee, I just happen to do that. And it's about 65 degrees, so when you put your feet in there, it's just like...
At 50 feet under, I could see an argument for building codes. But this is obviously extreme. And above ground, Darby argues his salvaged shelters are actually safer than what the codes approve.
Now, if I'm building out of cheap materials bought at the big box store, they're all outgassing, formaldehyde, plasticizers, vinyl that gives off a hormone replicating chemical that your kids think they're getting estrogen.
Why would we want to do that when we give them an alternative to go out there and pick up trillions of dollars of salvage that our great-grandfathers and forefathers left us knowing it would last 150, 200 years because they built it so good, never thinking we'd go throw it in the trash.
Cool place.
It's a really cool place.
Very cool stuff.
There's no doubt we need dreamers like Darby.
Someone for this? No.
He's still recruiting residents to his town, and he hopes to incorporate soon under the name Salvage Texas.
Okay. Yeah, guys, New Mexico.
This is New Mexico. It's a different type of Mexico. It's a New Mexico. Because it's a land of enchantment.
What do you want? You don't take care of me. You're not a mama. Are you sister?
What, do you want some spinach?
Yeah, spinach.
Who wants spinach out of the bag? All right.
New Mexico feels like its own place. Even the light is different here. Georgia O'Keeffe marveled at the blazing skies and land like the ocean. For O'Keeffe, this was the tail end of the earth. But that only made it more ripe for experience. Experiences that you can't help but having just by being here.
What is it? Fog?
Like it comes in pockets.
There's lightning over there.
This is Carson National Forest. That means we should be able to camp anywhere in here without getting in trouble. So I guess if we just camp right here, it shouldn't be a problem, right? It's a good place. D.H. Lawrence lived in a log cabin near here in the 1920s. He said New Mexico woke him up to life.
That's ice, huh?
What's ice?
It's ice. Oh gosh, we can't get out. We need a scraper. So it's 50 degrees out, and I'm sure overnight it was in the 40s.
You like texture ice?
D.H. Lawrence compared us to flies on a candy wrapper who could never get beneath it. For Lawrence, New Mexico lets you unwrap the layer of civilization and touch something real. Lawrence's ranch was 3 miles from the Taos Pueblo. It's the longest continuously inhabited place in the United States. For over 1,000 years, Tanoan people have lived here. New Mexico has only been a state for 103 years. 33 years after statehood, the first nuclear bomb was detonated here. A half-century later, an architect from Taos would fight the state for the right for a different type of test site.
There you go. Airships.
Wow!
These are all airships.
Interesting.
They don't look like one.
See, they're built into the earth.
They only look like short little houses.
They're not real ships, they're houses.
Bye-bye, doggy.
Turn left. Does look like the future, or
in New Mexico, we've put aside hundreds of acres to test nuclear bombs. So Mike went to the legislators and said, like, hey, let us experiment with housing. And they actually gave us 2 acres to set aside. So we're doing things that are not normally accepted by counties and permitting and all that kind of stuff. So we're just trying to do what works. The state of New Mexico gave us 2 acres to do any kind of experimental architecture we wanted to.
absolutely no restrictions.
No restrictions. The county comes and just kind of observes once in a while. This is our bottle making lab for the academy, because we have a school here where we teach students how to build airships and all our techniques. And this is where we cut bottles in half, then we tape them together and they make these beautiful little bricks that light comes through. And the county brings us bottles, the county brings us tires, the county brings us mulch. We use trash. We use whatever society is done with, and we're going to use it in housing. This is going to be a huge complex where we can house students in the future. Mike wants to put a river through it. This whole structure has been made by students over the years, and it's just all made out of bottles, cans, and tires. And there's going to be 30-foot trees growing in here. I mean, hopefully we'll be, you know, picking figs and oranges in here. Our county permitting lady, she came out just to do her walkthrough, and just the way we built the stairs wouldn't be permitted, you know. And it's super strong. There's no reason it wouldn't be permitted, but it's just not in their way of thinking to permit a staircase like this. We were just able to go off in here and do what we know works. To get an earthship permitted in the United States, it's got to be pretty expensive because a house has to do so many different things, right? These houses, these are called the simple survival earthship. This is what we're experimenting to really keep the price down. So like all earthships nowadays, we have this greenhouse interaction zone. So this greenhouse is what can heat your house during the winter. You open up the doors to the room and the heat goes in. During the summer, you close these doors to keep the heat in here. And ever since we started isolating these greenhouses, we've really been able to control temperature without any outside heat or cooling. And we can see a cooling tube here. This is a pipe that goes through the earth that's buried the house. And so the greenhouse sucks the air out of here and it gets cooled by going through all that mass. And this is kind of our little air conditioning here. This is a vault. Underneath the adobe is a cage of rebar and metal lath. To build one of these ceilings is kind of low tech and easy. Well, and look at this. This is what we call our digester. So after you take a shower, the water is going to go through the system that we use water 4 times. But so the shower water goes into here, which is a worm box. So the water goes in there and the worms help treat the water, and then it goes through into the gray water system afterwards. There's probably some worms in here somewhere. Oh, here's some worms. It goes from the shower into here, and then it goes into your planter. Okay. We really cherish water, and we only get like 9 inches a year here, so we got to save it and use it every way possible. Yeah, this is my neighborhood. Some of my kids ride their bikes. It's just people that want to live off the grid and like the idea of earthships, 16 years ago, when I came here, this community was shut down as an illegal subdivision, believe it or not. That was when some lawyer in town was fighting us, and we actually got shut down and people's lives got kind of shattered because of it. But then it seems like in the last 10 years, everything's switched and they're realizing this is a positive thing. Let's not harass these people. Let's encourage them. Let's let them do their thing. So this is the global. Mike calls it the BMW of earthships. This does everything any house in America does. I mean, this does it all. You have plenty of power to do anything. It stays at a 70-degree temperature. It produces food, it collects water, makes hot water. It's just a really streamlined, incredible. This is 40 years of research and architecture from Mike that he came to this. I think he's pretty happy with his house. The main thing that really keeps our house is that stable temperature thermal mass. So we have these massive tire walls, and then we're buried with earth. That mass holds a steady temperature. Then we got the solar element, so in the winter the sun shoots deep into the house, hits those mass walls. Those mass walls absorb that heat, and at night lets it out, which is something that seemed unreal to me when I first came here, but it's amazing. You can feel your wall on a winter evening giving off heat. So this is the greenhouse, which can be closed off to keep the house cool in the back, or it could be opened up to bring the heat into the house during the winter. So it's going to be a little stuffy in the front part until we open everything up, and then it's just like air conditioning. But the back of the house will be 70 degrees right now, no matter what. These are operable skylights, and it's kind of a necessity in an earthship. That skylight's sucking the air out of this tube, and the air gets cooled because it's going through a big berm of dirt. So by the time it comes out here, it's nice and cool. So this big pro-panel roof is our water harvesting element. So when it rains, all the water comes down to these gutters, goes into these tanks. The water comes, it'll rain, and then the roof catches the rainwater, and then we take a shower. That shower water gets filtered into our planter. At the end of the planter, it drops into a well. After you take a shower, your water is going to go through all these plants, and then right down here is a deep, deep well. Now, when I flush the toilet, this pump's going to go on because that's a gray water pump that is sucking up the gray water, and it's going to put recycled gray water into the toilet. And then it's in this box so we can, keep it a little quieter. That pump just sucked 1.6 gallons of recycled gray water out of this well into the toilet. So our toilet water has already been used twice. Once for, say, a shower, once for the plants, and then the gray water pump puts it in the toilet, and that's our third usage. It's not gross water, really, because it goes through different kinds of filters. We have charcoal filters in the planter, and the plants actually clean the gray water. So it really looks like normal toilet water, believe it or not. So this house, in a lot of ways looks very conventional, so we're trying to show people that earthships can look like any other kind of beautiful architectural house. This is the house that, you know, your typical American could actually live in. They would be happy enough because there would be enough power, there would be enough water, everything. So this is my house right up here. See that little dome? That's our little house that we lived in for 5 years. The community was shut down and declared an illegal subdivision when we first came here, so we wanted to live here still, and so we built a structure that was the size of a storage unit. This will be good. All right. We came out here without any building experience and just a lot of enthusiasm. In 2 months, my wife and I built that, got into it right before winter, and we had a nice little Earthship survival pod to live in while we built our dream house. Hey guys. This is the living room. These are all tire walls, all tires covered in adobe mud. This is almost like our main battery of our house, because in the winter sun comes and hits this, it absorbs that heat, and then at night it releases it. Tire wall right here, big heater. And this house is halfway in the ground.
That's important.
Well, you don't have to be sunk into the ground anymore. We used to think we did, but it helps. This is our master bedroom. It was our dream bedroom that we finally got done. So this bedroom has its own gray water system.
And it has its own food.
Yep. What's that? Actually, mint. Wow. So yeah, we have mint and rosemary and then a papaya tree. This whole table was full of tomatoes about a week ago. But we still got the fig tree, the banana tree.
And pretty maintenance free, as you're saying.
Yeah, don't have to water them. Okay, I'm gonna flush the toilet. So that's sucking the gray water out of the bottom of the planter down there. It's getting sucked into the toilet. So all this lush green in here is part of my black water treatment containment cell. So after you take a number 2 in the toilet, it goes to the septic tank and then it overflows into this huge 20 by 40, 6-foot deep hole that's rubber lined and there's gravel. And so all these plants, their roots are tapping down to all that sewage that's about 4 feet underground. You don't smell it, you don't see it, but what happens is you get beautiful landscaping, and I never have to water any of this. The black water is about 4 feet down. It doesn't even smell by the time it gets here, you know?
No, it doesn't smell at all.
You know, in town, people have leach fields that are polluting a lot of groundwater as we speak. This is contained. This is only getting used by these plants. It's not getting into the ground. It's not polluting anything. To me, I don't see why every house, every building in the world can't have these lined sewage treatment planters that grow plants. Why not? Back 20 years ago, you could come here, put $1,000 down on a piece of land, and start building that day. A lot of people are living here without a mortgage. They did it because of the way the system was back then. One thing about Mike is when I first came here, he was really big on the homeowner builder. He wanted to teach people how to build their own houses. It got him in a lot of trouble with lawsuits and stuff. A normal house has to be able to stay at 70 degrees all year round, and some of the earlier houses would get down to 65. So you couldn't defend it. We still encourage people to build their own houses, but we also got a little bit real. Sometimes it's just best for the company to build it for a client instead of trying to get a client to build a house who doesn't really have the skills. This is the house that's designed to feed a family of 4. There's more space dedicated to plants than there is to living area. The 6 principles that all Earthships incorporate is water harvesting, contained sewage, thermal mass, thermal cooling and heating, building with recycled and natural materials, solar and wind electricity, and the last one is food production, and that's the one we're really working hard at right now to really get going, is the food production aspect of it. Big jungles inside. This house was designed to feed a family of 4. There's more space dedicated to plants in this house than there is to living space. We did have a tilapia pond going here. They're pretty shy, but we also got turtles and koi in here. But this is all with the idea of trying to create protein, trying to create food for people, and this is all experimental. And we're just learning, you know? So we're learning a little bit every day. So now it's going to be a lot cooler in the back part of the house. This is the second greenhouse here. Usually it's just all living space, but Mike put plants even in the living space too. I think the one thing you can really say about Earthships is that we're ever changing. I mean, it's always you come back here in a year, there's going to be a lot of new stuff. We're always experimenting. We're always trying to make it better.
And that's, I guess, probably one of the hard things even about dealing with permits and zoning codes. And they stay in one place, and you all tend to change. So
yeah, it's hard for them to keep up with us because all the building permits and all that stuff, it's all antiquated thinking, you know, and they can't keep up with us. I guess it's up to us to kind of present it to them in a way they can understand. So yeah, you can just graze on your house. This house will feed you. This house will take care of you.
There's something about the isolation of a frontier that allows people to forget about limits and experiment. It's always been a characteristic of any borderland to reject old, dysfunctional mindsets and forge customs innate to the time and place.
This is Madrid, New Mexico.
welcome to Madrid, the old boarding house Mercantile. That used to be like the old main store.
That's not Madrid. That's not Madrid.
That car there. It's a very funky town, actually.
It is.
But with time, even frontiers can become more established territory. When I was a kid, San Francisco was mostly ignored by those of us in the more dynamic Silicon Valley. In the 80s, average people could buy a home here, at least in some neighborhoods, like the Mission.
This is a china cabinet. This happens to be, grandma's old dishes. The bed twists out.
My friend Johnny bought into the city on a housekeeper's salary.
This is a one-bedroom apartment. It's built 100 years ago. And in San Francisco, anyway, almost every apartment of this vintage came with a Murphy bed. We have a living room by day. So I moved here about 18 years ago. The neighborhood has changed completely. One of the things that people who have never been here think is that, well, you've got Google and Facebook and all these billionaire companies and they're just pumping money into the economy, but those are all suburban companies. These are all places that really exist 40 miles away, and the people who are getting paid a lot of money in those companies don't want to live in cul-de-sacs. They don't want to eat bad Chinese food in a strip mall. They're looking for a walkable neighborhood. They're looking for activity on the street. Previous generations really were looking for a cul-de-sac. They wanted peace and solitude. That's not what this new generation is looking for. These are the Google buses, and they come in. Right now, there's just a whole line of them. They'll just come in. Now, the companies are trying to put their offices physically in San Francisco, but it's an older city, and there's just not that much space. These buses were a patch. It's a way of getting people to live where they want to live and to work where they want to work. In a neighborhood that has a limited amount of parking, there's a shop here, there's a restaurant. They have to decide, do they want one customer parking one car on this one spot in front of there, or do you want a dozen bicyclists to pull up? So how many more customers are you going to get that way? The shopkeepers request this. The city does not impose this on anybody. So this stuff started out in a guerrilla form. It was illegal. People started to do this, and the city got upset, and they said, you know, this isn't a code, this isn't safe, you haven't asked permission for this. And then there was a negotiation, and people made their arguments, and the city said, we're going to do a pilot program. We're just going to test it a little bit and see if anybody gets killed, you know, basically. And then they realized, okay, this is good. It's good for business. The city can see the tax receipts coming in. They can see employment happening in these shops. These shops, when I first moved here, were all boarded up and empty. There just wasn't that much life going on. There wasn't that much business. This is Deepistan National Parklet. This was a driveway and one parking space in front of this person's house. They actually petitioned the city to convert that parking space in front of their home into a public amenity, which is a park. For a city, there's not a lot of greenery. Why not create your own little parklet right in front of your house on a street that kind of needs greenery? San Francisco has the fewest street trees and the least vegetation of any big city in America, so this is one way to sort of fit it in. It was completely illegal to do anything like this until fairly recently. There were some guerrilla movements where people would do it illegally. They'd have benches, there were little swimming pools, there were little mini gardens and mini cafes. They would park them there just for a day, and then they would move them away. And the city eventually figured out that, okay, there's really no reason to stop people from doing this. So they created a legal form where you could fill out a form and apply and pay a small fee. And as long as it met certain criteria for safety and whatnot, you could keep them, and it's now perfectly legal. So first, you have people changing the way they do things, and then the city, after 20 years, eventually catches on.
San Francisco now has the most expensive rents in the country, but it's only half as dense as a place like Brooklyn. For many, the clear answer to the housing crisis is to squeeze more units into the same space by building smaller.
This is a spacious version of what I'm going to show you. The version I'm going to show you is the smallest size studio apartment you can build in California by law.
I first met Patrick Kennedy 4 years ago when he was semi-secretly testing his tiny apartment inside a Berkeley warehouse.
This is it, yeah. Well, this is top secret. We don't have people living in it, although we did have an MIT student live in it for 3 weeks to try it out. This is it. This is the smallest legal apartment you can have in California. It's 160 square feet.
Do you think 160 is enough?
160 is enough, actually.
Panoramic, that's it. 160 micro apartments.
A year after our interview, San Francisco voted to allow apartments as small as 220 square feet, larger than Patrick's prototype and the state minimum, but Patrick was ready.
There it is right there. This is the first micro apartment project under the new San Francisco building ordinance that allows units as small as 220 square feet. And we didn't go that low. We went to 274. We wanted to show some restraint. I think we broke ground on December. When did we break ground, Kim? Was it December 16th? December 26th. And we will be done on the afternoon of June 24, 2015. This project went without opposition in the city of San Francisco with no hiccups, and it will have taken 5 years. So that's best case scenario. The home is this one that shows the whole enchilada. The permitting process, it's a combination of Kafka and the Politburo. It's the aggregation of 100 years of practices that just have not adapted to the modern age. I want to build entry-level housing in the city, sort of what Levittown did for single-family homes in the 50s. I'd like to do for single people, urbanists in the 20-teens. This is a micro studio, 11 feet wide and around 26 feet long. This is one wall of the micro studio. The other wall is here. The bay window goes out to the edge of the street here, and the entrance to the micro studio is right here. Some of our codes and restrictions and building limitations are outmoded and they don't reflect people's tastes and their preferences today. Some people will get by with smaller space. There are a lot of people that take a Zen approach to life in San Francisco who travel light. I also wanted to build something that I would have liked when I was 25. Oh yeah! I like ultralight backpacking, and I kind of want to find an expression of ultralight urban living. We're happen to be in the catbird seat of the new technology gulch here in Mid-Market. That building right there is Twitter. That building over there is Uber, Square, Yammer is there, Dolby Sound is there, and in this immediate vicinity there are, I believe, 16 tech startups that have a valuation of $1 billion within a half a mile of this spot right here. San Francisco's rents have gone up 40% in 5 years. Twitter is that glass building right there. That's the rear of it. Mere mortals and civilians find it impossible to find an apartment here. Airbnb is right over here. And the cities need to do something to address that problem. Dropbox and Box is over there. You know, within a mile of right here, there are probably 200 or more tech firms. You know, in order to build affordably in the city, you have to build densely, very densely. But the codes don't acknowledge that fact. As a result, San Francisco is the most expensive city in the country. Most codes are more an aggregation of scar tissue as opposed to a thoughtful expression of the desire of the city.
You think that things are outdated? I mean,
oh, there's no question about it. They go back to an impulse that goes back to the 20s when there, or earlier, when there really was slum housing and tenements being built. I think codes should focus on life safety and building form, and that's it. They should allow any number of ways how individuals decide to live and sort out their private lives. As long as they don't affect public safety and they reflect the sensibilities of the people on the exterior form of the building, I think the city should let whatever people decide is appropriate for them.
Nearly everyone I'd spoken to on my trip seemed frustrated with codes. But it's too easy to blame the code makers and forget it takes a body politic to create and change the rules. A century ago, when a few San Franciscans began lobbying to build a bridge across the Golden Gate, most engineers said it couldn't be done with such persistent fog, powerful winds, and strong currents. There was also a depression and no money from the state or federal governments.
What's fog?
When there's a lot of moisture in the air, it's like a cloud.
Then one engineer proposed a cheaper way of building. A few politicians got on board to help create a special tax district to raise funds. And in 1937, 200,000 people, including my father, walked across the world's longest suspension bridge.
Continue on US 101 north for 9 miles.
Has one wheel on the back. I wonder if it's one of these German.
Wow, yeah.
Things.
The Bay Area has some of the most entrenched codes, but it's also a place where change happens with the right leadership. I'd been emailing with one city planner who didn't discount the power of the individual. He also happened to work in the country's most famous civic center, set in motion years ago by one woman politician.
Yeah, it's crazy how futuristic it looks for being something that was built, designed like half a century ago.
Futuristic, but settled, not this sort of space area from the 50s. Something more subtle.
This is the only public structure that was ever built that was a Frank Lloyd Wright design. And what that took was effective leadership. Vera Schultz was the county's first woman supervisor. She was reading an article on House Beautiful. She read about Frank Lloyd Wright and was intrigued by him. And so that started this dialogue between Vera and Frank Lloyd Wright. He subsequently came out to the coast and met with a majority of the Board of Supervisors. There was one supervisor who was kind of a good old boy, old school. He wanted to get a local architect, somebody who would come up with a more traditional design. The majority of the board, once they had a chance to interact with Frank Lloyd Wright, there was no question that he was the right man for this job. He was awarded the contract, and then unfortunately, within a year, he died. Groundbreaking had already occurred. So even though the board had actually voted at one point in 1960 to stop construction on the Civic Center, the good old boy said, wait a minute, we're just going to walk away from this building and turn it into a hospital. There was kind of this uproar, and the local paper took a poll, and it ran 8-1 with thousands of people voting 8-1 to say, hey, we kind of like this building. We want it as our Civic Center. So being good politicians, they realized they were up against a pretty strong headwind, and a week later they voted to continue construction, and as we know, the rest is history. See, what's amazing too is this is like a little hothouse that you've got hibiscus growing there, and outside of a carefully tended greenhouse, you're just not going to get tropical plants like that.
Ben Berto sees parallels between how this building got built and how we can better adapt housing regulations to our needs.
And this, of course, allows for natural air conditioning.
He says it takes leadership, plus an informed public. But he realizes that government regulations can be quickly made obsolete.
Ultimately, it's something that society has to kind of evolve and address. And of course, it being government regulations that take a long time to come into being, they're also going to take a long time to change.
What about evolving codes the same way startup companies work? This agility, this agile development.
One of the big buzzwords when you're doing, when you're monitoring biological systems is adaptive management. And so that sort of relates to that whole concept of to say, okay, we've developed these codes over the years and decades and things like that, but with what we now know about insulation or wiring or plumbing, is there a way to maybe back off and say, hey, if you do it this way, you can have much less of a regulatory burden to deal with that, that this is sort of the minimum. I think you're seeing some of that just because a lot of times it comes down to cost. I mean, people can't afford copper pipes, for example, so you allow certain types of plastic pipes. I will say this, it's a body politic, right? These are public regulations, or you can go to many states and do whatever the hell you want. So, but even in areas where they are regulated, if there are enough people that say we would like to explore this, in point of fact, local jurisdictions can adopt their own codes. Communities can make those type of decisions.
It reminds me of Arcosanti.
Mm-hmm. It's easy to idealize places where you can do whatever the hell you want. But the reality is, most of us live in cities now, and that's a good thing.
Look at that. Wow. Keeps going,
Yeah. But it's like cheap housing in the desert, but there's no water. They don't ever end, do they?
For decades, we've been experimenting with the suburban dream, but so many mini utopias have failed.
New homes, $119,000, bank REOs.
Home.
A home for $119,000.
An entire one.
Yeah, a big home too. from 1,900 square feet to 3,000 something square feet. From the low 200,000s.
It seems it's very hard to be self-sufficient without an urban core to drive creativity and innovation. Studies show a direct correlation between urbanization and prosperity. And people report being happier in more urban countries. But this doesn't mean our idea of urban can't change. The city of Los Angeles has decided to do something revolutionary. They're throwing out their outdated planning codes and starting from scratch. Frustrated with a code book that grew from a tiny pamphlet into hundreds of pages of amendments and revisions, city planners are rewriting the zoning rules to allow faster innovation toward a more interconnected and livable LA. The secret to the success of any community,
Go on, ladies.
whether city, suburban, or isolated utopia, is in allowing innovators to innovate.
We got this third container over here. A friend of ours, as soon as we got this container like unmodified, like the day it got dropped off, he was like, hey, can I just rent that from you and use your tools to convert it and like buy my own windows and stuff? And I don't know how to weld or anything, but maybe you guys can teach me as part of the deal.
He has his little bike tire chandelier. There's his chandelier. And bike handlebars.
Oh wow, those are bike bars. That's what's really cool. Like, it's super small, but this dude's like a programmer and he's building largely unsupervised. Like, he'll ask us a question as he has it, and just seeing him come up with cool stuff like bike handlebars that turn into his closet, that is really exciting to think about scaling and sharing.
We need to start planning for change, because as information moves faster, it's becoming increasingly obvious that nothing ever stays the same, and the best codes are those that make way for evolution.
That's good.
Whoa. Hey, nice. Here, give me the ball. Stand right there. Another good one.
Usually the first thing doesn't work. I always compare it to the first whatever washing machine or the first typewriter or the first motorcycle or whatever. You have to do it again and again. That's why you need laboratories where you accept the notion of failure. So transformation is very much what life is. I call it the becoming.
Come on, let's get a book.
We'll use them all up now, though.
Okay. But there's two. There's two boxes.
Oh, there's two boxes. Oh, well. Alright.
This power of transformation offers us the means to transcend our limitations.
Asterix and Obelix. Is this your favorite book?
We have been through very long phases of success in success, great achievements, horrendous tragedies, and so on and on. But we know that things are altering themselves because that's what the living reality is. So the question is, how can we make the next little step that might be more promising than the last?